Bueno, casi hemos terminado con la jornada de hoy. Nos toca la última ponencia, no por ello menos interesante.
We're almost finished with the day. It seems like many of the attendants left. Maybe they were just here to hear about emergencies. But well, hopefully the presentations will be very interesting and you will enjoy them. Right now we are going to hear the presentation about successful experiences in operational risk management. And we have three wonderful professionals here who are focused on their work in security and safety in very different sectors. Physical safety, aerial security, and we also have security in a refinery. We are going to start with Fernando Abos, who's going to tell us about security in the case of raids. He belongs to the Civil Guards. He's a commander and he retired voluntarily. He is a teacher in the National Defense Center. For over 20 years, he carried out different tasks as the head of different units specialized in anti-terrorist struggle. In 2011, he joined Prosegur as the General Security Director. He is currently the Global Director of Security and Risks, and his unit has other subunits like acquisitions, fleets, services management, etc. Do you leave any tasks for other people? You do everything. The floor is yours.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
En absoluta familia, ¿no?
We are in a very intimate environment now because everyone left. So I can say whatever I want to say and no one will hold it against me. Even though the audience is very reduced, I want to start by congratulating MAPFRE, not only for organizing this event, but also because of the format. Mixing people from security and insurances and sharing our challenges is a total success. Sometimes we have trouble explaining people what the situation and the problems is. In the Anglo-Saxon world, this is invented because most companies have risk management heads, because trying to mitigate or reduce losses without considering how much it costs to transfer that loss to the insurance company, and not doing that in an integrated way in a company that is very much interested in losses and claims. Well, in the Anglo-Saxon world, they have figured this out. In many Spanish companies, well, most Spanish and Latin American companies have separate departments. Security or safety department that depends on a CEO, and then they have an insurance company that's under finances or someone else. But there's no connection between these two divisions, so you spend your resources, money, your procedures trying to avoid losses, and then you have others paying policies, and they try to pay as least as possible every day, and things are not doing in a holistic or integral way, so that what you spend in security can have an impact in the returns. So, congratulations. What would be interesting is to have people from security in the other room and people from insurances here. We shouldn't see security and safety and insurances as separate things. Secondly, I'm going to talk about something very primitive in terms of security. Security is constantly evolving. We started hearing about security information, food security, security in many different fields. Today I'm going to talk about the most primitive security. Yesterday I was having a drink with someone, and this person was telling me that they had a gun put against their heads to have their bag stolen. That's a primitive security. That primitive security or insecurity is growing in many regions of the world, like Latin America. Each year the situation is more insecure. I'm not going to present Prosegur commercially, but I'm going to invest a couple of minutes to tell you what we do. We're one of the largest world security companies. We have about 180,000 employees in 5 continents. We are a very strong company that is very knowledgeable of the security in Latin America. We are, although there are some countries in yellow, we're present in all of these countries. And we're mostly focused in Latin America. We're the largest company in Latin America. We have over 100,000 employees. We really know Latin America and its situation due to our clients and our workers. We have 3 main businesses. Traditional surveillance and technology, that is a typical security guard who's protecting a public building or a nuclear plant. Those of you who are not familiar with this sector, this should be increasingly connected to technology. If you have a security guard and you don't sell the devices and the technology, well, that's old-fashioned. So we have integrated the 2 businesses, security and technology, surveillance and technology, in one single business. Today I will tell you about Prosegur Cash, that's money transportation. Money doesn't sleep in banks, money sleeps in the value transportation companies. If you want to get millions of euros from the BBVA bank, well, there's no money there. There are no assaults on banks. Those of you who watched 80s films, you saw how they were banks robbings, but that doesn't happen. Well, because the money is not in the banks anymore. Who has the money? It's us who have the money. We have 10,000 armored vehicles moving cash everywhere in the world. In our deposit basis, we count $150,000 million. Sorry, euro, 150,000 million euro, and we transport 1.2 billion euro in our armored vehicles. That cash was transferred at the commission of our client who pays to you. The client transferred the risk to you, but the risk is still there. Now you're in charge of managing the risk. Every day, 10,000 yellow armored vehicles are moving money, and you have to prevent assaults, and you have employees counting and handling money, and you have to prevent them from robbing the money. And there are bands of criminal bands whose only goal is to steal that money. I'm going to tell you the situation in Brazil. In Brazil, the situation in terms of people dying out of assaults, extortions, robberies is very dire. What's the situation in Latin America doing? The economy in Latin America is growing. Some of you come from those countries, but what's the situation in terms of security? Latin America is the most violent continent in the world with the highest number of deaths, and the place where more people die due to guns and firearms. And these numbers are increasingly growing. 2018 was more violent than 2017, and 2017 was more violent than 2016, and so on and so forth. The world rate of crime is measured in deaths per 100,000 inhabitants. That's the rate used scientifically. For you to have an idea, the world rate is 7. Spain has 1.2. Some Nordic countries have 0.6. In Latin America, the average is 21, and that's an average because Latin America has countries with rates over 80 and cities over 100, and the rate is growing. In some years, the average is going to be close to 30, and the situation is going to happen. Those of you who are work for companies present in Latin America, well, be aware that this is going to grow. Mexico is characterized by organized crime, the drug cartels. There were some years when there was some control. The mandates in Mexico last for 6 years. So for some terms, there are some policies that are harsher, some others are less harsh. When you fight against organized crime in a more violent way, there's a division in the organizations. Right now there are over 35,000 deaths, not counting the unknown deaths, and as we go south, it gets a little less. It gets a little less unsafe. We have the maras, those gangs that move drugs, but they're not large groups, and there's less organized crime, but a very high level of crimes. Central America, Honduras, Salvador, Guatemala, etc., the rates are over 60 and 70. San Pedro Sula, Guatemala City, etc., have ratios over 100. There's lots of violence. Companies that are present there, beware. These are very complicated cities. South America is characterized by the fact that there are 3 countries that are producing cocaine. Many of you may think that my presentation is very much focused on this crime, but we need to understand what's happening. Latin America is not the most violent continent randomly. Why doesn't this happen in Burkina Faso? That's way poorer. No. Well, what's happening, it's connected to these facts that I'm telling you about. It's drugs that are making the situation the way it is. Cocaine producing countries are Peru, Bolivia, and I'm going to give you more information about what's happening. So we have cocaine producing countries. To the right we have a very complicated country, Venezuela, which is right now, well, the crime ratios are not very reliable, but the research from the different international organizations tell us that it's the country where there are more deaths happening currently, 87, and it's a country where organized crime is in cahoots with some organizations, with some governmental organizations. So it's we have Peru, Colombia, and Bolivia on the left producing cocaine, and that cocaine goes to Venezuela, and from there it goes to different places. Brazil is the 8th largest world economy. It could lead rankings in the future, but the crime situation is really going to hinder this evolution. And then when we have the south, which is more calm, Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina, that has more calm dynamics. You have a graph here on the left. Those are the cocaine crops or harvests. Here we have Peru and Bolivia down there. Those are the productions in the last years. The production is pretty stable, but take a look at Colombia. And what's happening now? Colombia is peaking in terms of cocaine production. Never before in history so much cocaine had been produced as it is being produced now. In the times of Pablo Escobar, there were 180 hectares, and now there are over 200 hectares. It means that there are many organizations that buy drugs in its origin. Buying drugs in origin is the most profitable business nowadays. If you buy drugs, you can buy for 450 or 500 drugs per kilo, and the profit is of 30,000. I mean, you buy it at 500 and you sell it at 30,000. Sorry. And this is a problem because there are many people who can access places to buy drugs in places that were inaccessible now. When you buy the drugs in origin and you sell the drugs in the destination, you skip the brokers and you become a real drug boss that helps you make tons of money that can help you extort by equipment, etc. So let's talk about Brazil. Brazil is a very powerful country. Those of you who are familiar with it know that it has 200,000 million inhabitants. The south is very different from the north, and the crime rates are of around 30. And as you can see here here to the right, this is the rate of murders in Brazil, and we have 27 states. There are 5 regions. There are regions that are pretty stable, like São Paulo, Curitiba. These areas are richer, and the northeast is poorer. Here we have 45, even though you can see it. So we have regions that are larger than Spain that have an average of 45. So going to Fortaleza or Recife, where you have 100, is not the same thing as going to a place like Curitiba, where the rate is 100. Brazil is a very dangerous country with an ever-growing violence. So what happens to us in this context? Well, Brazil is the place where we have the largest number of workers, 45,000, when we have those vehicles that transport money every day. And what happens to us in Brazil, where we get raided, assaulted, our vehicles are destroyed, tunnels are built, or our headquarters sometimes are exploded with bombs. Diego, the Prosegur insurance division, is here. When we started working in Brazil, the raids happened with firearms, assault rifles, and sometimes you reacted and you were able to get by. But in the last 3 years, 100% of the raids happen with explosives, with bombs. And 52% of the cases we get by without any harm. So to a group of 20 people with assault weapons and explosives raid our facilities, and we have to see what we do as we go. Do I still have time? Okay, I'm going to be very brief because I just have 7 minutes left. I'm going to tell you what happened to us and how we solved it. We were suffering assaults that had never happened. We have facilities where 100 million, 200 or 500 million euro are deposited, and this is extraordinary. Sometimes we don't have any raids in 5 years. Sorry, assaulting one of these bases, one of these facilities, is very difficult because the police forces usually react. These bases are built in a very solid way, so you need 1.5 hours to try to access the headquarters. Usually the police reacts, and the criminals usually don't want to do it. But we started suffering assaults where 40, 50 people would block the roads and block the road with firearms that were more powerful than those of those police, and they started assaulting the plant in a very quiet and calm way. They knew that the police weren't going to access, because even if they were able to get there, they wouldn't be able to outforce them. So we started. I'm going to show you a real video, the first time that our bases were assaulted. This happened in November 2015. This was a situation of shock. This is a very large city, Campinas, 2 million inhabitants, one of our main center in Brazil. The police is equipped. There are 24-hour units. The units know how to act. So we didn't expect something like this happen. They got they got large trucks, they put them in fire in the road, so they blocked the roads so that the police couldn't access the unit by road. So around 40 people dressed in black, they were all dressed the same, they were perfectly equipped and armed. They had explosives, they were obeying orders. Some of them had military training. You can see them down there placing the explosive. They had fenced off all the area. When the police gets there, they cannot access the area because many of the policemen are just armed with guns, and the criminals have heavier weapons or more powerful weapons. They just place the explosive. The explosives are going to explode. You will see the explosion here, and that's the first of 6 explosions. They are capable of being there for 1.5 hours, and they go through the different levels of security, and their way of operating is totally professional. I'm going to skip this because I don't have that much time. I know you love this, but I'm going to have to skip the images. So I will just tell you that, as I was saying before, the assaults to trucks happen once every 3 days. So what happened? After that raid that you could see here, it happened in November. In 2016, we had all these raids. It started becoming something common. And when this happens in places where you have millions of euro, you start fearing that your business is really at stake. Because those of you who are security directors, you know that when things like this happen, you start looking around you and you see that you are by your own, on your own, because you can't Google what to do when I'm raided with explosives. No. Yeah, it's like Googling what happens if a gas tank explodes near a school. No, there's no information, so you need to think for yourself and see what to do. We worked, insurances and security worked hand in hand. We worked with our reinsurers because it was also a problem for them. So we did something that was successful. We knew that this wasn't so much about having more powerful vaults, it wasn't about having more security guards. No, it was about having a more integral plan that involved many more people. Because what this reflected was that Brazil was acting as a failed state before what was happening. Imagine that a city of 2 million inhabitants is raided by criminals that explode cars in front of the police stations and that cuts roads with trucks, and the police can't do anything. In Ciudad del Este, in Paraguay, we had an assault that was the most mediatic one that we suffered. Imagine up to what point the absence of the state was felt, that the government in Paraguay thought that maybe what was happening was a coup d'etat, because what they were hearing was that hundreds of people were moving with assault rifles dressed in black, and what they were doing was trying to raid one of our centers. They were people who crossed the border from Brazil. So hundreds of people are invading a city and the government can't do anything. Our plan was based on an institutional, and it had an institutional access, political access. We needed to involve the police, the different ministries, the different policy departments in the country. We needed to work with the police departments, because Brazil is a very decentralized country and the different police departments in the different departments are not connected. What happens in Fortaleza is not it's not known by what's happening in its neighboring department. So
we did the same. We were middlemen to have middlemen to transfer information, etc. etc. So we talk about measures in administrative and law aspects, so that these type of law crimes were similar to violent crimes. We created police units just for the protection of values of banks. We raised the bar and we said, if we do something that is extra powerful, or in 2 years' time, rather than 5 assaults, we're going to experience 15. We also control the inner part of company, because people was very much afraid of working in a place where there's open bases where people are counting money. People have died here, I didn't say that, but in many of these assaults our staff has died. So we also have to talk about unions, we have to warn, we are spending money, this is totally safe, we're in contact with the police and the government, but this is something that has to be controlled, because we've seen cases of people who didn't want to attend and work for us. So this is also in the media of the country. And finally, the part that we usually pay attention to, risk prevention, operational aspect, how to reinforce and improve and do new things. My time is over. Still have 2 minutes. I would like to play one final video. In this process, you try to think about everything and anything. I have to talk to the ministry, the police, I have to hire more people, and I have to create new things. So we create new things among all of us. With Diego, having a cup of coffee, what can we do? This is how the money is in Brazil after these events. We find that if assaults were taken 1 hour and a half, well, why not 3 hours? So that's real money. In some cupboards, where we have a substance called pudu that you ignite with one button in 45 seconds. It creates a paddle that is so hard that in order to access cash, it takes you 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to end up with that, because it's like a rocky element, and as you did not expect it, you don't have the necessary equipment, and this is in order to protect. This is in our 100 bases in Brazil. In the smaller bases we did the same, but without any cupboard, and this is a remote activation. You can see that this starts and this ignites. And this is great in a small basis, because it's not only that you have to go there, drill there, but it also permeates the dome, and it's unbreakable. It turns, we have already experienced 3 assaults, apart from the 6th one I mentioned before, but these 3 have been stopped. So that's why I'm saying it here, that's why you see me here. Otherwise, if we experience another one, we would lose face. But we have stopped this type of assaults. In 1 year and a half, we have experienced no assault. And the jewel of the crown of invention, because some of us were also warned, and maybe that we could be made redundant. This is a money shredder. I create a machine, I put the money inside and activate with a button, local or remoteless, and I shred money. But are you going to shred millions of euros? Well, let's try and talk to the Brazilian bank to allow us that this money is to have less than 50% of the damaged money to be back, to have it back. And we obtained that, so every banknote destroyed is 1 real, 20 cents. So 5 million euros can be 80,000 euros. So this is a good way to persuade people not to rob. Insiders can tell you that these machines are here, and all you can do is push the button and destroy it through shredders. There is no other place in the world where this shredder exists. Our bases count with this. Is cheaper than the liquid mechanism I told you before. And this is the final message. When you are scared and you don't know what to do, as innovation was mentioned earlier on, I have to ask you something, by the way. I think that is very useful for something that we do. Innovation is the way to resort to when you say, well, this is a countdown, I don't know what to do. And this is all I want to show you. This is a real case, and these shredder machines are installed. And I still have a minute. That's all. Risk and insurance together, we have to go hand in hand, because we're cheaper for companies if we work hand in hand. We can see, we can look at things from a comprehensive way. If you can explain your CEO that you have a global approach, what you spend in safety and insurance is a win-win situation. In some problems, the solution is not only the traditional that we already manage, but we have to raise the bar and think about the big picture and maybe take into account other aspects that do not only belong to your area. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Fernando, for your presentation. Now we give the floor to digitalization and implementation of working permits in the CEPSA group, and that's why we have Álvaro Camacho, Safety Chief of CEPSA Gibraltar. He has a degree in chemical science, a master in occupational risk and all specialties, official of protection of port installations and dangerous goods and oil refinery in the Confederation of Entrepreneurs in Andalusia. His experience has been in the refinery of Gibraltar, San Roque, in January of 1991. Later on, he's also been an engineer of process, director of a plant. And in 1998, he's part and parcel of the Security Department. In 2014, he's the coordinator of safety, not only of the plant, but of the whole group of CEPSA. So now you have the floor, Álvaro. After talk by Ume and his presentation, what can I do? My presentation is going to be very easy. We're talking just about fire in a refinery. We're not talking about dead people. Jesus, Lord. I'm going to tell you some project that we're carrying out because it lasted, because it was a complex one, it's taken time, related to digitalization of work permits. But before that, I would like to show you our refinery, not to publicize it, yes, well, a little bit, but also so that you can have a clear picture of the magnitude of the works that are performed there and the volumes we deal with generally. This picture is very curious, 1966, and the refinery is exactly my age. I was destined to work here, and this is the beginning. And next picture is, I'm going to explain you a little bit. It's a very special location. It's in the Campo de Gibraltar, in the Bay of Algeciras, more or less in the middle of that bay. This would be the Gibraltar Strait, the Rock of Gibraltar. San Roque is there. Algeciras is around there. This is Africa, because we're 12 kilometers from that continent. And I don't know if you can see it well, but a small mountain that is Ceuta. That is the location of our refinery. We have a port with 9 places to stop the ships, and there is a super oil super tanker, and here they leave their oil tanks with 1 million or 1.5 million of crude oil because they have a great unloading capacity. Some figures. We are the biggest refinery in Spain. We have distillation capacity of many millions, as you can see on the slide. So we talk about barrel, which is a measure, which is around 160 liters. Just only in this refinery, there are 260,000 barrels a day that are processed. The production of 2017, you can see that for more than 4 million of crude oil, diesel, gasoline, kerosene, etc., as you can see on the slide. We are privileged because in the Gibraltar Strait, the amounts of tanks that are passing by is great, is enormous. And we also have a lot of petrochemical products, xylenes, toluenes, all types of substances, all different varieties of products related to oil that are in refinery. In this room, 90% of materials that you can see here are derived from crude. If you are eating chewing gum, that comes from oil. Many useful things. Ferrero Rocher also comes from oil. Apples that we see so squeaky clean have a layer of paraffin that also comes from oil. In my presentation, where you can see several pictures, correspond to different types of work that we perform. This is a tower of distillation that has been replaced. The area is very straight, so there was no possibility to have cranes. So there are some devices that have some hydraulic motor to put it back, some jacks. This is what we perform on a daily basis. But let me explain you something more in particular. It's about 50 years old, the surface of 211 hectares, global surface. Working permits, 70,000 are performed a year. That's an average. It's a village with 2,000 inhabitants. In Spain, there are villages that are less populated than this. And I always crack the same joke, except priests, we have everything. Cooks, painters, policemen, all kind of professions, mechanics, electricians. You can find all sorts of people in our refinery. So that's 4 million of hours, working hours on average. That's a lot. The refinery has its own fire station with staff from the refinery. 30 firemen in facilities that are considered right now as one of the best fire stations in Europe. Not only because of our means, material means, but human means as well. UME, the Spanish Emergency Military Unit, was with us drilling 1.5 years ago, and we were working hand in hand with them. By the way, I can witness their knowledge, their know-how, and their commitment, because it was a very satisfactory experience from the personal point of view. So let's talk about digitization. If we look at statistics of accidents, Historically, they've been reducing whether work problems or industrial accidents. Why these accidents take place? Not all of them, but the great majority. In a refinery or any factory, the best situation is to be in the maximum load, functioning to the very top, everything working, and that is stable. That situation is stable. A refinery is a place of blessing. Where are the problems? When we middle there. When do we middle? When we have maintenance, repairment, when we modify things, etc., etc. Normally this maintenance works were special, if you don't mind me saying. Accidents were very often, mistakes were made, and it was very usual. We did not have back the means that we have today, and working permits for us. By the way, what's a working permit? It's a means through which somebody requests something is done, and there are people and staff that are involved in that work that have to perform an analysis of the danger in performing that work and put the prevention means so that that work can be done with no harm. In a place where we use wells, we cut things with devices, and that has to be done safely. This work system have been evolving in a way that this centralization, there's been plummeting in problems. Our philosophy and our method to analyze risks and for control measures is very effective. That's undoubted. Now we have very few problems, but we're in the difficult situation, and we have to attain zero casualties, zero fatalities. And the next logical movement was digitization. When did this idea came to our head? In the year 2013, we incepted this idea. So going from a system which paper, physical, two people met that were involved in this work. They analyzed things, put their control systems into place, and authorizations began and works began. And then we said, okay, what can we do to rethink this system that seemed to work so well? So in the year 2013, we began with the idea of this system. We began saying the first question we ask ourselves. This is very much related with maintenance. All maintenance management is in the SAP platform. So what can we do? Shall we go for SAP? Or should we look for any other software? Or do we create our own design software? Then we had a group work. You cannot say that in blue, but I'll tell you. Safety staff. And we had to make the first screening. We had to make the first decision. Is anyone familiar with SAP? SAP is not very user-friendly, to say the least. So it was discarded, and then we went to see in the market what we could find and decide whether we design our own software or we use something that was in the market. We visited working centers in the north of Europe, in the UK. And finally, we came to the conclusion that with all the tools we had, we created a working group in the year 2014, very heterogeneous working group with with all the departments involved in different type of work permits, per project, people from ITCs, and they work very well. I mean, we were designing there some functional requisites of the system, how we want the system to work. And this is asking something for the three wise men. This is what I want this and that and that. All of them cooperated and worked very well. And then we sent this information to different providers. They proposed us different things. And after their proposals and some showcases, we came to the conclusion that one specific software was the one we were going to choose, which fulfilled the functionality we required. The design had to be still performed, because it can be more or less designed to fulfill your philosophy. So more or less it fulfills our principles. We also had to make adjustments in all these requirements and tests for functioning in modules. There are many different cases that can appear, and then we came to a model that we seem to be quite fitting, quite useful. Now we have a program that's done. Now we have to translate that into the refineries and chemical plants. That's another story. What a beautiful picture you see. So, as for implementation, we're showing different departments how to use a working permits, because that's our philosophy, you know what it is. But what we're teaching them is how a software functions, which is different. The type of authority is not necessary to be taught. The type of risk analysis is not necessary to be done. We know all what we're talking about. But this software is in need of many people taking part. And that is where problems may arise. We have to train more than 400 authorizers in refinery, Gibraltar, another one in Huelva, another one in Tenerife. We're talking about a lot of people involved. Many training hours, many implementation hours that were performed in different phases. We have many different plants, 7 in particular, and each plant has 2 parts. So it was performed step by step, because the supporting resources, we couldn't deploy and support to authorizers, globally speaking, because not everybody is well trained. So we performed this training, practices, implementation. We gave some time, training another plan, practices, implementation. This was a system that took time to start. You can see here works that we usually perform. It's funny because it's a distillation tower, 70 meters high, and we have to modify a part that I'm pointing to change metals. And what we did was to put this structure, cut the tower, erase that area, you cut down, you remove the piece that you want to modify, you load it down, 74 meters exactly. This tower is suspended in the air. You have to take the piece that you want to discard, you have to wield, you put the tower back down, you wield it again, So this is the type of works that take place in a refinery, and this type of works we have to authorize with risk assessment and risk control, etc. What do we earn? What are the benefits we obtain? We have witnessed two different types of benefits, as for safety and as for management. As for safety, this system requires an increase in planification. We used to say that a person would take a form of work permit, fill it in, and took the authorizer and said, do this, here and now. But this system is different. You need at least 24 hours or 48 hours. You must inform the permitter, the person, you have a previous analysis, you have to plan in advance, and in the end, this is translated into more safety. Because if we don't plan things, then is when we are risking or compromising safety. This process, where you begin with a flow to authorize work, the flow may start 4 days earlier, and each intervening part, each stakeholder has to analyze within their competencies environment the work of the different risks, how different risks may compromise the situation. So the final authorizer, who has the final word to say yes or no to something that people are very much bonded to this work, they work in the plant, chiefs, etc., they have very detailed information on different risks, and then they can fill it in with the circumstances of that time and place. I'm about to close. As for isolation, we also need isolation control aspect.
We have the location plans. I will elaborate on this later. We make works consistency in the different sites that CEPSA has. Although we have a common storage area, there were always differences, and the flow must be homogeneous and consistent. Another important thing is their interdepartmental control, because there was no way of carrying out a statistical critical analysis of all the tasks, because it was very manual, very paper-based. With 70,000 permits per year, going paper by paper, it was very complicated. So thanks to this, we can have an overall vision, and we can carry out analysis, and some of them are very, very valuable. Graphs. I find them very useful. Here we have a plan of the refinery. It's a very basic one, and it marks how many permits to work there are. This is a real-time graph. The control rooms have some dashboards where you can have real-time information about where the tasks are being carried out. If you zoom in, you can have a more detailed information of the locations, and you can zoom in even farther, and you can even see what the type of tasks are. Imagine you have an emergency, there's wind, east or west wind of a specific speed. At a certain point, you may know that a part of the refinery may be affected. So you know who's there and what that person's doing. And if you click on those permits to work, you get the full information. Then at the end of the day, it's true that in a second stage, we are starting to work on this second stage, and there is a piece of paper that is printed and the worker, whether it's an electrician or whatever, this person receives a paper with the measures that need to be met. Right now, we are working to get rid of this paper, to be totally paperless. So this is what I wanted to share with you. It was hard, but the success has been very relevant, and we are finding that the benefits in terms of security improvement have been great.
Gracias, Álvaro. Bueno, por último, Antonio Peláez.
Lastly, we're going to hear Alberto Peláez, who will tell us about commercial safety, aerial commercial safety. He's an aerial engineer who studied in the Polytechnical University in Madrid. He earned his degree in 1991. He's been working in the aerospatial sector since then. In 1995, he joined the General Direction of Civil Aviation as the head of departments of aerial navigation programs. In 2001, he started working for Eneco, and he specialized in project management and technical assessments in the field of airports and aerial navigation. In 2006, he joined SENASA as head of the safety reports system of the DGCE. I don't know what the DGCE is. He'll have to tell us what that is. And he takes part in cooperation programs between civil aviation departments in different countries. He also works as a teacher in different schools and business, in different universities and business schools. He's an associate teacher of the Polytechnical University in Madrid. Antonio was the creator of the operational management system of the Civil Aviation Institution, and he has been a teacher in that course on many editions. I want to join my colleagues in thanking the organizers, and I want to talk about how successful this edition has been in terms of the presentations and the quality of the topics. My turn is very difficult because people are tired, hungry, so we are going to capitalize on the adrenaline of Fernando's presentation. My presentation is going to be very general. I'm going to talk about means of transportation. I'm going to talk about commercial aviation. This is the 100th anniversary of the aerial transportation. Aerial transportation started in 2019 in a systematic way everywhere in Europe, and Spain was not outside this launching. Commercial aviation has started a little bit before that. In 2014, the first aviation line was established in the United States, and it used what was called an aeroboat. It was a hydroplane, and passengers spared 4 hours of road transportation. Here we have Zeppelins. The LAG Zeppelins transported thousands of people since 1914. If you're interested in this presentation, you can download it because the images are not very clear. In 1919, the company KLM was created. KLM, together with Avianca, are the longest standing commercial aviation companies. And ever since, the sector has grown constantly. In 2017, for around 60,000 of the world population flew. There are 27,000 planes flying. There are very interesting applications. Flight Radar is one of them. If you download it, you can see all the airplanes that are currently flying in the world. And it's really amazing how many operations there are. There are lots of infrastructures, lots of companies, and things must work like clockwork, transporting people so that people can make it to their connections, so that the luggage and the load arrives. And not only that, things need to be done safely. And in order to understand aviation as a security or safety model, we need to talk about history. And I must apologize because I am really into history and lecturing, which may be counterproductive at this time. But I'm going to talk about history. Do you remember the film, those magnificent men and those flying men? Do you remember it? It was translated into Spanish with a very ridiculous name. There was a gentleman called Fisher. He was one of these magnificent men. We don't know much about him. He must have been well off because he had a pretty good plane. It was what he had was a monoplane in a time when biplanes were more prevailing, and it had a driving wheel like those in cars. He must have really liked technology because he had a radio system that was very, very advanced. This man died at the age of 24, and what we remember was his death, because his accident in an airfield in the UK with good weather conditions. Well, the plane took off, and after a short while it fell. He passed, as well as another pilot who was riding with him. What's interesting about this circumstance is that that accident was investigated. And it's very amazing because it was investigated with modern criteria. Investigation committee was created, and the opinion of pilots, witnesses, the manufacturer of the aircraft, of the engine, and of the forensic doctor was also sought. So it's not limited to that. The causes of the accident were researched. Apparently, there was a turn to compensate the forces. The plane needs to be tilted, so the body of the aviator went over the wheel, and he fell off. The different causes can be identified. The causes of the reason of the accident were established. And the most interesting thing is that the report contains an advice to avoid this type of accident. Because of the forces, the driver fell off the plane. And the advice or the recommendation is how about having the pilot fastened to the seat. So what they were recommending was to have a seat belt. So soon after the accident, there was a publication saying that the Aero Club appreciates the need to have exhaustive and systematic investigations of all flight accidents with fatal consequences. So a committee has been created, and very typical of Britons, it says that the title of the committee that is to be created can seem pretentious, but what's important is the work that it's going to carry out. So 40 years later, an international accident research report was created, or a standard for researching accidents. Many accidents have been researched and investigated using this standard, which has led to prevent accidents. There are a series of accidents that have been very symbolic because of the outcomes. For example, many aviation institutions were created due to an accident. There are technical devices that prevent collisions on land or in air, fatigue prevention devices. These are some of the elements that made aviation safe, learning from mistakes. And it's the first element that I want to emphasize. So what happens in our daily work? Accidents happen, but how can we ensure safety in our daily work? Well, we have regulations, compliance with regulations, audits, inspections, and checks to make sure that the regulations are complied with. This is prescriptive safety, and it's based on 4 principles. The first one is to think that everything is planned and that most situations won't involve deviations from the planning. That is, we have a horizon where there's minimum uncertainty, and I develop procedures so that if people are trained, I have the technology, we're going to be able to operate in a safe manner. What's the second element? Sometimes there are deviations. In those cases, we need to use technologies and procedures. Thirdly, people need to be trained, and if something happens that is totally abnormal and unexpected, we need good professionals. We have our hero here, Sullenberger. Do you remember that in the Hudson River, great tragedy was avoided? He would be what we call an influencer now. Right now we would refer to him as an influencer. After a couple of minutes of glory, he is a real advocate for safety. So that's a prescriptive approach. Here we have a curve here. In blue we have the accidents, and in gray the number of casualties. We can have the lines that are the trends. There are times when there have been reductions, there have been periods of growth. The growth is due to the appearance of larger aircraft. So after a decrease, there was a slight increase in the 90s. And 1996 was a very lethal year. In 1996, there were 1,800 casualties. Particularly in the US, in a period of 7 months, there were 3 accidents, 2 in the US and 1 in Colombia. And that raised the alarm. We have the feeling that the model we have doesn't ensure safety. Why? Because aerial transportation had been liberalized. Up until the 80s in the United States, air transportation was in the framework of an oligopoly regime. There was a surveillance system that was proportional to what there was there. When liberalization happened, there were many companies and productive pressures, and many of those accidents showed that the authority or the safety institutions didn't have the means to ensure safety. That triggered the creation of 2 administrative institutions. There's a committee in the White House and the International Aviation Institution, and a new model was sought, a new model that could ensure safety. We have to present a concept which is practical drift. This is a didactic part. In a prescriptive model, there are procedures for everything. Principles, policies, procedures, and that's what ensures that we can meet our objectives. But in reality, there's a gap between the conditions for which the procedures are created and the real operation conditions. That's what's referred to as practical drift. And practical drift establishes a separation where there's uncertainty. There's a gap and there's uncertainty. Our daily work forces us to try to identify that uncertainty to avoid issues. And we can only achieve this by gathering data. There's a dichotomy between what's imagined and reality. So this new approach acknowledges this issue and looks for the way to solve it. Right now, we are applying performance-based safety.
La seguridad basada en el desempeño
Performance-based
parte de
safety
principios opuestos a los de la seguridad predictiva, es decir, las
is
cosas no se
based
pueden
on
planificar.
principles that are opposed to
Las cosas,
predictive
muchas veces
safety.
la
Things can't
formación,
be
la
planned.
tecnología,
Often,
los procedimientos
training,
no están
procedures,
pensados para
technologies
hacer frente
are
a
not
esas
conceived
eventualidades que se puedan
to
producir.
face those
Y por
unforeseen
último,
events.
pues, necesitamos
And
improvisar.
lastly, we need
Y,
to
por supuesto,
improvise.
el personal, el
And
profesional
of course,
es necesario.
the staff,
Bueno, pues eso
people
es la
are
gestión de la
necessary.
seguridad. Y nosotros
That's
tenemos que
what's
usar mucho la
referred to
acrónimo también
as
como el ejército, se
safety
llama SMS.
management. And
Entonces,
we
los
refer to
sistemas
that
de
as
gestión de seguridad
MSM.
es la nueva
So,
filosofía de
this
trabajo en
new
aviación desde hace
philosophy
como consecuencia
is the
esa medida
one
que se
that is
tomaron al
prevailing in the
margen. ¿En qué se
sector.
apoya la gestión de la seguridad? En tres
So
disciplinas
what's
que ya existían. Una se llama
safety management
aplicada al diseño
supported,
de
or
sistemas.
what is it
Todo
rooted
lo que
in?
se aplica en el
Well,
programa espacial de
to begin with, we have
desarrollo y se
system
perfecciona en el
safety.
programa espacial de vuelos tripulados.
That
Prestar
is
atención a
the
los
one
factores
that's
humanos.
that allowed
Y por último,
men to get to the moon. Then we have
gestión de negocios.
human
Y
factors, and then we have
diríamos
business
toma de
management
datos
or
para
business
saber hacia dónde va la
intelligence.
empresa.
Data gathering to
Como
know where the
consecuencia
company
de esos
is
procesos de liberalización del
leading.
transporte aéreo,
As a consequence, this is due to the liberalization of the sector.
convenientemente adaptado e integrado
So
y
if we
combinado,
adapt this
compone
and we
los
combine it
elementos
properly,
de la
we
gestión de la
get
seguridad.
the elements
Gestión
of
del riesgo, promoción de la
safety
seguridad, garantía de la
management
seguridad,
and
no voy a
security
aburrirme
management.
con la jerga esta, pero esa es la forma en la
Risk
que estamos
management,
trabajando hoy día.
security
Es decir,
promotion,
captamos
guarantee
datos,
or insurance of
tenemos
security or
procesos
safety.
que nos permiten
So we
convertir
gather
esos datos
data,
en
we have
información,
processes
y por
that
último, tomamos
translate this
decisiones
data in
basadas.
information, and we make decisions
Esa
based
es
on
la
this
filosofía
data.
de
That's
trabajo
the
con la
work
que pretendemos,
philosophy
mejorar nuestros niveles de seguridad.
that is aimed at improving
Y el
our
resultado
safety and
se lo muestro
security
aquí.
levels.
Antes le enseñé
And this
la
is the
curva hasta el
result.
96.
I
Bueno, pues,
showed you the curve up until
el número de
1996.
accidentes ha disminuido
The number of accidents
En
has
el año
decreased
2016,
enormously. In
esta curva está muy
2016,
fuerte,
well, this
porque
curve is
debería
not
ser hacia
correct
abajo.
because
En el
it
año
should
2017,
be
perdón,
tilted downwards.
tuvo
In
ha sido el
2016,
año más seguro de la aviación.
well,
Solamente
2016
hubo 10
was the
accidentes.
safest
Y estos son los
year
números
in
que
aviation. There
tenemos.
were only 10 accidents and
Hemos conseguido
very
el-
few
los mejores
casualties.
registros, volando
We
con
got the
4.100 millones de
best
pasajeros,
records
se produjeron
with
12
4
víctimas
million
por
passengers.
millón de
There were
pasajeros.
only 12 victims per million
Bueno,
per million.
Todo esto,
passengers.
podría acabar aquí la presentación.
I could have
Yo
ended
no
my
lo digo,
presentation
pero
here,
no solo todo lo que reluce.
being egotistic
Este
and
año
looking at
pasado
myself,
hemos tenido
but
un problema de estos que nos agitan y nos hacen salir de
it's not
esa
gold all that
complacencia.
glitters, because
Se
we have
llama
had situations that
737 MAX.
brought
Supongo que
out
muchos de ustedes
brought us
seguro
out
que habrán oído hablar de ello.
complacency.
¿Qué ha sucedido ahí?
The
Hemos tenido dos
737
accidentes en
MAX,
un periodo de 6 meses
B737 MAX
con un
accident.
modelo de avión
We have had
nuevo,
eh,
recién salido,
3 accidents
ciclo,
with a very
y esos
recent
accidentes han tenido un
aircraft
patrón
model,
común.
and
Mismo
all
modelo de
the
aeronaves,
accidents
ocurren
follow the same
minutos
pattern.
después del despegue.
The accidents happen a few minutes after takeoff.
Está complicado el texto, un poco lento, sí. El avión registra una
The
inclinación que se
aircraft
llama ángulo de ataque, que es el ángulo que
registers
forma el avión con
an
respecto al
inclination, which is the
anómalo.
angle
En esa,
with
a partir de esa información
angle of
anómala,
attack
no real,
that's abnormal. That angle is
se produce una
abnormal.
tendencia a
So
picar,
there's a
que es la que desencadena.
downward trend that
¿Qué hay detrás de esto?
that causes
Detrás
an
de esto
accident.
hay
So what's behind this?
Un problema con un sistema.
There's a problem with a system,
Un sistema, pero en origen, aquí lo que tenemos es un problema
but
asociado
the
a la
root
presión
cause
competitiva entre los
is
dos grandes
connected
fabricantes
to
de aeronaves.
the competitive pressure
En el
between
año
the two
2010,
large
Airbus
aircraft carriers. In
piensa en una nueva
2009,
actualización de su
Airbus
avión estrella, el Merlin,
wants
la
to
versión Neo,
update
Y
its
Boeing responde
320, and Boeing
lanzando una actualización
replies
de
by
su
updating
modelo más
its
exitoso, el
most
737,
successful
del
model,
cual
with
vuelan
it,
7.000
which is
aviones
the
en todo el mundo.
737. There are
Bueno, pues el
7,000
Para
737s.
ser más eficiente necesita nuevos modelos, nuevos motores.
So, in
Nuevos
order to be more
motores que
efficient, the
son más
737 needs new
que
engine,
adelantarlo,
new engines that
respecto
are
a la posición
wider
original
and that
y
need to be placed
Al adelantarlos, en algunas condiciones,
in a more
el avión
advanced
puede tener una
location,
tendencia al encabritar.
and in
Pero
some
la forma de
situations
motor
the plane may
En
have
esta
a
situación,
trend
pues hay que
to
buscar algo
fall
que
backwards.
mantenga la seguridad.
So you need to find
Ventajas
something
de
to
aplicar
to solve this. What are the advantages of implementing this improvement in an existing plane? All the 737 operators are told that they need to buy the plane and they don't need to train the staff, that the cost is the same. You just need to carry out some online courses. Airplane or people who are in the airplane industry are nodding. That's why many companies decided to buy this 737 because it's a good plane. So what is the system that caused the accidents? Well, it's a system that was designed to prevent accidents. That's the sensor. If there's an angle, the back stabilizer moves, which makes the plane go forward. And that's how you correct the position of the plane. That system is called MCAS. And that system was designed applying the system safety principles. My design is to be safe, no danger needs to exist. There was a danger of the engines. So, well, let's use technology to avoid that tilting as consequence of that angle. And the system was called MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. We're also going to provide alert systems in the event of abnormal angles for the pilots to be aware. First problem, that alert system was optional. Not all planes came with it. Right now, planes are purchased the same way you purchase a car. There are some features that are optional and need to be purchased at a higher price. Another principle of safety is to train the staff, but the crews were not aware of that system. The manuals didn't have any information about that system, and the only procedure, I don't have anything against Boeing. I'm sure this could apply to Airbus. No one designs a plane to crash. So the procedure applied by Boeing was not that applicable when the planes took off, because the planes were old, and if you want to disconnect that movement of the back stabilizer in the case of an aircraft that was certified at the end of the 70s, like the 737, you have some small levers that help with the stabilizer, but since the stabilizer is larger, it's impossible to change that with human power. The crew of the plane that crashed in Ethiopia tried to stable that, and it didn't work. So this is a perfect storm. And what's paradoxical is that a defense system destroyed the plane. So what do we have nowadays? We have a complicated situation because the 737 is not operating since March 2019. All the operators who are waiting those 737 are trying to establish leasing agreements with other companies. Those who are leasing planes are in a very good situation. Boeing is working on improving the algorithm. But there are more and more information that help us understand these accidents. There is controversy on what the role of the design authority is and how the appropriateness of the design was established. Sometimes the design authority is not trained. In the US, there's many subcontracted work. The balance between safety and production can be lost in many occasions, and maybe this is what happened in this situation. On the other hand, the design of the system was changed. Initially, it only had to be activated in very unlikely situations. But then, in the test flights, some additional problems were detected, and that device was recommended in more likely situations. In the original design, there were to be 2 sensors, and finally there was only 1 sensor. If the sensor is activated because of the impact of a bird, and it seems that's what happened in Indonesia, the angle information activates the MCAS and the plane goes down, and the crew, if the crew is not aware that this is happening, there's a crash. One system that is triggered by one single sensor is a weak system. In the case of Airbuses, there are 2 sensors. What was the outcome? Loss of confidence, old planes, etc. Going back to the origins, I found this sentence, this quote, of this man who worked in aviation insurance. What this gentleman, Captain Lamplos, said was that aviation in itself is not dangerous, but in a place like this, even to a higher degree than what happens in the sea, it is terrible, hard to end in the case of any incapacity or negligence. We have a few minutes if you want to make any question to the speakers. Vale. Implacable, relentless.
First of all, I would like to say that I love your presentations. I come from railroad area, but what you commented on those of us who take planes very often is the case of Boeing. All transportation systems in general have many redundancies, so that a sensor does not have the way to have a redundancy to compare. It is the same way when you screen something. You need 2 modes, and that way you can compare. So it is panic to find out this information. And an authority, at least in railroad, authorities always act as independent committees. So can it be that an authority is not independent and delegates everything on the manufacturer? It's hard to understand. Yes, as for the first question, we will have to wait and see the results of the query. Last weekend there was an article in the New York Times that said that the system suffered different configuration changes that were not communicated to the authority. Then, maybe that is the solution. And that the person that decided on that change was taken from a very local point of view. Not the whole organization was made aware to make a decision accordingly. As for the system, as for the working philosophy of the federal administration, they try to cut expenses, but this organization designed people in manufacture to perform different things. In Europe, we do the same things with examiners. Knowledge is in the operator, not many times in the authority, unfortunately, I have to add. So in the United States, they have been more ambitious as how to delegate that. This is provisional, because we'll see what is the final result of the query, because it may have been even counterproductive. We'll see. I loved 3 great presentations, so congratulate to all speakers. My question is for Álvaro. In a village of 2,000 inhabitants, how do you organize training to make sure that procedures are going to put into place exactly? That's very difficult and complex. Taking into account that out of the 2,000 inhabitants, 600 people are working in shifts. So you cannot take the break-in times, but you have to use specific days, specific moments that may be on weekends. So we have a safety department that plans perfectly. Working shifts are good because you perfectly know what shift will be operating in 2 years' time, in February, at this time, at this moment. Who is going to be working there? That's a good thing for that, as a way of planning. As the personnel of CEPSA, yes, it's something that information we can control. Difficulties were working shift and services personnel. That was the problem aspect. Because the organization and control is not up to us. So we have many people and we start to inform them, you see, we need you at this time to organize this type of course, and you cannot take many operational service corporations because you don't have that much staff, and you have to communicate with other companies. So that's a difficult part. That was exactly the most difficult aspect of this project. So, okay, one training course, one specific training course. No, you have many different training courses depending on the different roles that people had to play. That was the greatest challenge, without a doubt.
Bueno, yo simplemente en relación con Boeing, porque claro, ahora digamos hay como una
Boeing, there is a very special sensitivity. I've read a piece of news with the problems. They have problems with the wings, 737. Up to what point all these can be linked with this crisis period of competitiveness to adjustment? Have we lost the notion of what we are actually handling? Should we go back to rethink a lot of things? It seems that we're entering in a feeling of uncertainty that we had somehow overcome. The aspect of wings, do you have any information? The same as you may have. Now the focus of attention is on Boeing, and many things arise precisely because we're focusing everything on Boeing. So we have to wait until the audit report appears. But because of liberalization, risks are introduced for safety, and that dynamics between achieving the maximum output, if it is not counterbalanced with safety aspects, this can lead us to accidents. The historic background, aviation is extremely safe, especially in this time where we have so much transparency. All efforts are being put into place in order to tackle this problem. But in accidents, teaches things, especially from the organizational point of view, the role to guarantee means for authorities, stress, management. But there is a risk of red taping. So we should never lose sight of that. The important thing is that the means, what we want to achieve is the important thing, but also the means are important. So we have to take into account all these new aspects that may introduce risky situations in monitoring. Well, I think that if there are no more questions, we should close this session and go to the interesting part, going to lunch all together. Thank you so much for your attention.